Just began. I saw the light go on.
All right, perfect. So with that said, so my name is Beth Morissette. I'm with Parlay Consulting Firm. I also always disclose I'm on the Board of Education for Westside Community Schools. I'm very excited to have you as part of the first roundtable for 2020. We have two more set up for later in the year following this conversation. I also would like to go ahead and if you have, you should be able to see my screen. If you have any difficulties with technology, Alex Mitchell, she can help you in the chat box as well if you have any questions for her to help you out with the technology. And then let's get to our agenda. So today's goal is to have a conversation that will lead to future discussions that will enrich our innovation in the STEM sector. This has been a unique environment in the last 4 months as we've had COVID-19 come in and really flip things upside down, both personally and professionally, and often those worlds have collided. So we've talked about how this has helped us and forced us into forced innovation because we had to quickly be nimble and readapt to what we needed to do to be efficient and effective in our work environments. And we want to hear how that has really impacted your world, whether it's in the workforce or whether it's in the learning environment, K-12 or higher learning, and what that means going forward. Because there's an opportunity where some people, when you try to make innovation happen, people will do it, but they don't want to do it, and it doesn't always stick. And right now, because everyone's having to go through this innovation and everyone's had to do things different, we have an opportunity to leverage and say, okay, what is working? What's not quite working but could work better? And what are some challenges that I just don't know that that's going to happen? And then what's that mean for the future? And how do we want to lean in? So we're really hoping that we can bring together this community of STEM sector and really start digging into what everyone is experiencing and learning from this time. So after we go through the roundtable today, you guys will do breakout rooms, and then we'll come back together, and your facilitators, you've been assigned a facilitator per group, they will help identify what to report out, and then we'll look through what conversations we had today. We'll identify themes and potential areas to dig in deeper, and then we're hoping that the next roundtable then in September, you will be able to identify which area you want to dig in deeper and really start looking about how this can inform your work and your workforce as well. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Julie for the welcome.
Yeah. Thank you, Beth. I appreciate you working with us on this. And welcome to everybody for taking time out of your busy day to join us for this roundtable discussion. As Beth mentioned, the jolt of COVID-19 pandemic has moved us from those communal workplace and school environments to isolation. And that has impacted the way we have learned to work and learn. We forged some new normals as we adhere to the new culture of social distancing. And over the past several months, I've seen, as I know everyone on this call has seen, the creativity and innovation that has met the challenges ahead of us. The Omaha STEM ecosystem believes in the power of connection, collaboration, and communication, and we wanted to capture this creativity by providing this forum as we talk about what's next. So I look forward to this opportunity. I thank you for your time today as we share ideas together that will give voice to ways that we can help build a stronger community for Omaha. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you, Julie. Appreciate that. Julie, do you want to say hi really quick to your executive committee members that are on the call today too?
I do, and I want to thank the executive committee, which is Megan Addison, Jim Collison, Carlos Cozart, Michael Flesch, Neil Grangenet, Elizabeth Mulcairn, Andrea Nebel, Chris Shaban, Jeff Seabury, Levi Thiel, Tracy Redding, and Lori Segursky. And also the planning committee that made this possible. So thank you.
Thank you, Julie. And all the facilitators today, we've been meeting and planning about how to use the Google Doc and the questions that we want to ask you and make sure that we have the right amount of time for you guys to be able to have some good, rich conversation. So what that means is that we're going to break you out into small groups. If you haven't been in a Zoom call before, which I'll be shocked on if there's very many of you, that you'll be sucked into a breakout room. We've identified who our facilitators will be for the day. They will not only help facilitate the conversation and make sure that, if we're running out of time, they might be like, okay, let's go ahead and move forward. Let's have a little bit more conversation in this area, or let's hear from somebody else. We really hope that you all take advantage of this and share your thoughts and allowing space for others to give their ideas as well. They will then be taking notes. The facilitators will be taking notes in this Google Doc, so we'll have one solid document that we'll be able to share out along with the recording to today's conversations. And then they will be the ones who then will report out. So then you guys will be able to come back together as a large group and be able to hear what were some of the top ideas that really resonated with the small groups. And then those ideas that we share out in the large group we'll move forward with. All right, and then the next time, the meeting is September 23rd. Several of you were great and committed to all 3 roundtables. And if you haven't committed to the next one, and you're like, I need to come back, there is some good stuff going on here. I like the synergy. Register, absolutely register, and get coming back to the future roundtable conversations. With that said, and feel free to use the chat box if you have any questions for anyone. You can use it in the small group and the large group as well. I'm going to have my staff, Natalie, Alex, and Julie can always help jump in. And if there's something in the chat box that I missed, that they can let me know too, or else they can address your questions in the chat box as well. Really quick, we have had a tremendous response to today's Meet Roundtable. Like I said earlier, we have over 70 people registered. We had 60 on when we first started talking. And this is a variety of the representation or the businesses and the education that's represented on the call. So it's really a great diverse group. We're gonna have amazing, rich conversations. And so just wanted to let you know and see who's all represented in the room today. Okay, so for the small group, what you're gonna do is the facilitator, these are really instructions for the facilitator. They're gonna click on their name by this link here will take them to their group. And then they're gonna do a quick introduction. They're gonna just ask you guys really quick to identify your name and what company you're with, or where you spend the majority of your time. Your facilitators should be sharing their screen so you can see the questions in advance and you can see that they're accurately capturing your ideas and thoughts. And then you can also, you guys, if you would share your screen too, and you can also see who all is in the room and have conversations. Sometimes I'm guilty of it too. You might recognize a face and not a name, and then you turn on the video and you're like, oh, I now have a name and a face that match. So that's a good way to build some networks as well. And then the facilitators are going to use the prompt questions to help guide the conversation. They'll take notes, and then when they're finished, you can just hit the leave breakout room, and that will bring you back to the large group. Am I missing anything, Julie?
Nope, I think that's good. Can you shoot Jim Donnell the list of questions?
It's in the Google Doc.
Oh, Jim, can you access the Google Doc?
If not, Alex can send him a link to the Google Doc real quick.
Okay.
All right. All right, so what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna look for my breakout rooms because that little box disappeared, there it is. And I'm gonna go ahead and open up all the rooms. You will have 22 minutes in your rooms to have conversations. And then if you don't jump into a room, I will assign you to a room if you haven't been assigned yet. So happy facilitators, having fun with great conversations, and enjoy the time together to share about what you have been learning. All right, John, let me get you hooked up into the room that we have you assigned into. All right, let's see.
Stop recording right now.
Nicole. I'm sorry, what?
Did you want to stop recording right now?
Yes, thank you. How'd it go?
Very well. We had some really great discussions. We were very, everybody was probably in the education sector. We did have nonprofit, but they were, you know, like the Do Space and things like that. We did have the foundation was represented, but she was very focused on the student side. So we got a lot of good insights regarding students and families. And
good. Glad to hear it.
Yeah.
The time goes by quick, doesn't it?
Yes.
How are we doing, everyone?
That time went fast.
It goes by quick, man, especially when you're having great conversations. And I did not hear a moment of silence in any of the rooms that I popped in on. So I think that the energy was pretty good. I'm excited to hear what were top things that come out. And, you know, our goal is to get you out of here by 9:30 to make sure that this is a really efficient time for you and that we don't do an overstay in your time. So with that said, Natalie, are you on? I see you, Natalie. If you wouldn't mind, I will share my screen, and that way you can do the highlights from, I don't know if you all noticed the names of the groups. We had some fun naming the groups. We have a soon-to-be senior at UNO helping us with our Google Doc, and I think it was her idea to do the periodic table of elements as the group names. So we have hydrogen with Natalie's team. If you would like to just take a couple minutes to highlight what you guys talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had the opportunity to talk from our different vantage points about how we have used the different tools available to us. And there was a shared theme that, you know, there was creativity and innovation because we needed to be. And there was a renewed vision and a renewed look because of that. So the topics that we'd like to consider moving forward include, we talked a lot about all of these opportunities now available online, but we'd like to see some data on the public participation, considering what opportunity gap is present. There are people who are able to take advantage of these and others who may not be able to. Next is how do we measure productivity moving forward, especially considering the impact of moving work home and how that's affected work-life balance. And how workplaces can take that into consideration moving forward. Next is how do we continue to do things differently? So we've innovated so far, but how can we engage people beyond webinars and Zoom to avoid asking them to sit at their screens for 10 to 12 hours a day? Next, as we consider moving back face-to-face, how do we overcome limitations of size and space related to social distancing and maybe merge the lessons learned from our original methods of content? And then next, we consider that there are so many great things happening. How do we continue to cross-pollinate these ideas between different sources? And then finally, we just talked about the continued uncertainty. So it's really hard to know what the needs are going to be present the next time we come together, even, although it's just a short time away.
Thank you, Natalie. In the chat, Paula commented, great question about engaging with less screen time. So that's a great way to use the chat today as we're reporting out. So if there's other things that people say and you're like, that really resonates with me, feel free to drop your comment in the chat so everyone can see it. All right, nice job, hydrogen. That takes us to helium. And that facilitator is Julie Sebastian. Julie, can you give us an update of an overview about what your group discussed?
Sure. So we talked about some of the successes and made it to the last question and really realized that what we're looking to continue to identify are solutions for younger students to be able to take classes or participate in virtual learning without, you know, sort of immediate parental support or actual attendance with them. We also talked about solutions, needing solutions to make the unique mentoring program that a couple of the participants in the Helium group know about. One who runs it, which is called the ACE mentoring program, Survive. It relies on a pretty complex software system. So being able to expand the use of some systems in a greater way would be helpful. Someone brought up that even today, watching how we're utilizing breakout rooms was helpful and could be a solution for some of their questions about online learning. And then we talked about remaining connected to the people that chose to be in this roundtable so that we can continue to reach out to each other as resources, continue to share our innovations and learn from each other. And then also remaining versatile and flexible, because things will continue to change. We know that. And, you know, being willing to continue to try and experiment is going to be important.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Team Helium. All right, that takes us to the Lithium group. Jim, you were the facilitator. I know you got a little bit of a delayed start, but if you wouldn't mind giving us an update on what you guys covered, that'd be great.
Great. And, you know, with technology, I hope I can defer. Alex, would you mind summarizing, because you were a part of taking those notes from the beginning, and I got thrown into oxygen and I had to come back to lithium. So I apologize. Alex, are you there?
Yeah, I am. So really the conversation just started off with looking at the different ways that everyone is utilizing the different technological tools in everyone's organization. So whether that is travel is being different, the way that people are educating students. A huge common trend that we saw throughout our conversation is the conversation around equity. So this whole global pandemic has really has changed the view of a lot of things and has opened up a lot of different gaps where for remote learning for some students may be easier or more efficient for them. However, it creates a huge challenge for other students that may have the technology that they need, but they also don't have the environment that allows them to learn efficiently. Also, another area that we want to just learn more about going forward is just the workforce development in rural areas. So how can we adapt those to be more inclusive in these areas? Another thing that we wanted to talk about in the future is what people truly think that is going to stick of these efficiencies and changes. So for example, we know that remote meetings most likely will stay just because the fact that it's a lot easier to transition between these meetings. And so just looking to see what are some of the changes that we have already implemented that will actually stay and how they will impact our jobs going forward. And then just the last thing is just looking at the areas that are now an option for students that may have not been an option previously, but with the pandemic and how education is changing, they are now an option for those students going forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Alex and Jim and Team Lithium. All right. That takes us on to the next one. And in the future, I need words that I can say easier. This makes it, I'm going to be a little bit slow as I say this one to say it as well as I can. So group beryllium, did I totally butcher it? Tracy, like who knows this?
I think it's beryllium, but don't.
Yeah, beryllium.
Okay.
All right, thank you. All right, that's you, Neil. So come on down.
Okay, well, we had a great discussion. I'll say just a real couple of quick highlights, keep us under the 2 minutes. Several places have pivoted to economic recovery quite nicely. The Chamber, in fact, is leading something called Thrive 2020, which is a nice pivot to help with economic recovery. We had some great conversation about individualized video messages, just a short 2 or 3 minute way to connect with somebody, particularly like a donor, just to say hello, and that seemed to have gone really well and something we could use in a lot of other contexts. Some things that have been unexpected is that large group meetings sometimes go better with Zoom than they did in the other sorts of environments. And so, for instance, Juneau had a strategic planning with over 300 people who they typed in the chats and asked questions that way. So that seemed to be a nice approach, and others had used that as well. And then also things we want to know about in the future. What's the best etiquette on Zoom? Similar to what you sent out But even like with students, is it okay for them to do certain things in the background, like have a cigarette? That seems kind of like if there's a no smoking policy, they shouldn't be able to do that. And so there's different questions about that. And then also, how do you avoid Zoom burnout? How do you keep it fun? So that was some great discussion we had. So thanks.
Thanks, Neil. I heard of a story of a student having a beer during class. So you never know, right? So great conversation on Neil's team. I will not try to say it again. But that takes us to, gosh, I don't even know if I'm going to say this one right. Group Boren. Elizabeth, take it away.
Okay, so we had a really nice, interesting discussion with our group, and we really were thinking about partnerships. How do you keep partnerships going? How do you keep them engaged? How do we do this well when there's not travel going on? How do you form new partnerships when you are using technology and Zoom? So that was a large discussion that we had, just to kind of dive in better. How do we grapple with this and keep these partnerships alive and form new ones? Online delivery channel. There's a lot of online delivery with school districts, with businesses. How do we do this well? How do we know we're doing this well? We have a lot of nonprofits. We have a lot of businesses who are being asked by school districts or by the school system to jump on board and to start providing some of these different online components. But how do we do this? And then another one was, you know, I think that's supposed to be everyone is in survival mode instead of very, but really our business, what we heard from our business partners in this discussion is they're in survival mode. They're trying to survive. They're trying to work through how to use some of the technology for communication. And then finally, we had a really long discussion, and it kind of goes back to what Alex said about equity, is we are finding out, not only are we ramping up really fast and not understanding or how to utilize all the different technologies, but we're finding out that we have a large population that don't have the devices, don't have the internet, don't have the technology, a lot of confusion, don't know the culture. And so how do we start teaching and learning and getting these components put together so that it's you know, everybody's equal and everybody has the same access, because we don't see this going away anytime soon with the use of technology.
Excellent. Thank you, Elizabeth and her team. And that takes us next to Group Carbon. I can say that one easily. Okay, Rosemary, you're up.
Great. Well, we were in such great conversation that we didn't have a chance to maybe fill in every question, but still was a dynamic discussion. You know, some of the same themes that have already been discussed come up a few times around that opportunity gap. So who has access to technology, and how do we as out-of-school providers, education facilitators, you know, business partners, help to close that gap, and what does it look like? We also had a discussion around professional learning for those teachers and the out-of-school time providers. How do we support them, you know, in this atypical, I think Dawn said it, atypical learning environment where, you know, typically children can, you know, go and have other enrichment opportunities outside of the home. And now we're saying you're doing everything in your house. You're doing it online, and not everyone has a support system to be working in that environment. We also discussed, you know, what does the work school environment look like post-COVID? So, you know, does school time permanently change as a result of this experience, from the built environment to, you know, learning practices? And the same for, you know, we're moving towards more of a hybrid model, knowing that we can be just as productive working from home, you know, a few times a week. And what do we lose with both of those opportunities? Mm-hmm. So I would say those were our primary three areas of focus around the discussion, but mostly a lot of it around the opportunity gap.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rosemary. And that takes us to Group Nitrogen, and that is Cynthia Ray as our facilitator for this group.
All right, a lot of the things that we touched on have already been commented on, but just briefly, we talked about, James Blake from Lincoln Public Schools talked about being able to use this time to be able to greater assess demographics and start to reach out to businesses, because that wasn't something that they had been doing in the same way that the Omaha STEM ecosystem has so far. Talked about even the technology in cleaning and how that, you know, I hear this a lot in my work too, that, you know, like well buildings, things like that, things are going to be very different in buildings. And just the shift in like, how do you do something virtually and have students engage and be active? So how do you split the time between, you know, verbal conversation, you know, virtually, and hands-on activity? How do you make that work? And then in terms of the improvement, I think most of our conversation was around the mental shift, but we've all experienced how this can really work. We're, you know, we're seeing, you know, meetings that have gone very well, access to people that you wouldn't have had before. And so that, that has been exciting in all of our businesses and schools. And then in terms of that dive deeper, I think we kind of continued that conversation is, you know, like, how can we dream big about bringing, you know, experts to students, you know, people that they would have never had access to before. And Hannah ended it by noting that businesses and nonprofits really need to know what schools need, because, you know, we'll work hard to bring it to them.
Great, thank you, Cynthia. All right, that takes us to Team Oxygen with Shannon.
Yeah, we discussed a lot, again, that's already been talked about. But one of the things was, I kind of liked the way Chris Shaven put it, was we were all just basically thrown into this emergency situation where we had to figure out technology really quick, figure out how educators were going to continue classes. Some classes did better in the online learning situation, and some students just got really burnt out, couldn't keep engaged. So how do you continue with this type of learning while keeping students engaged? So kind of going forward, that's, you know, one of the questions is, again, with equity, how do we maintain equitable education for students? Some students don't have the technology available that other students may have. So then what are we looking at as we go forward for education? You know, looking at going into the fall semester, and then beyond that is kind of where we want to go in the future.
Excellent, thank you so much. And then that's going to take us to Tracy with her group, her team.
All right, thank you. Yes, I just want to kind of say ditto on all of the above as well. And we were very education focused. You know, we had some nonprofit and even foundation, but we were very focused on students and families. And I think, you know, a lot of the things that, you know, everybody had to pivot quickly, and we were able to communicate, we were able to prioritize and really treat students as a whole person. You know, you had to really take into consideration a lot of the personal factors. And I think one thing that I liked that came out of our conversation was that we got to know not only our students on a little bit more personal level, but each other. And so even though we're remote, it seemed like some relationships may have even gotten a little deeper because of this experience. And so that might not be an innovation, but I think that's definitely something positive that has come out of it that we discussed that maybe hasn't been mentioned yet. And so, and also just the opportunity to come together, engaging in things that you wouldn't normally. So yes, we focused a lot on the lack of access, the inequity of access to technology and Wi-Fi, but also almost increasing access. Like someone had mentioned, like, how do we bring in experts? Now that we are all familiar with Zoom, how do we bring in those experts and we're able to engage in events like the OSE, like this event, someone mentioned this was the first time they'd even gotten a chance to participate in something like this. So that definitely was a positive that came out of it. And then looking to the future, you know, a lot of ours focused around equity again, and those opportunity gaps, as has already been mentioned. Where are the gaps in connectivity and access? How can we help? What can we do? Training for teachers and formal and informal education on the best practices, and continue to make engaging a little bit easier using Zoom in the future post-COVID. How do we sustain that?
Mm-hmm. And what will be those best practices that's coming out of this? Yes, excellent. Thank you, Tracy, and your team. That takes us to our final team. We're going to wrap it up with Group Neon with Mike from MCC. Mike, what do you got for us?
Okay, we had a great group, a lot of educators, and we had Avenue scholars in there too. So we talked, we can ditto everything, a lot of the same things. Actually, probably the second bullet, you know, we talked about the fact that we pivoted, you know, I know a lot of institutions pivoted, we pivoted in, you know, less than a week. I mean, so the actual end result was it really went quite well, although there were rough spots, and we're getting better, and we'll get better in the fall, and that, you know, best practices will definitely be. So, you know, I heard training, equity, gaps, you know, the previous things, that definitely would be the fact that learners can succeed. You know, even though you've got some kinesthetic learners, the forced migration, we did talk about the fact that did help them to, you know, they could learn. They did figure out that they could do things. And there's a lot of talk about in our group about how do you do those virtual labs in nursing, for instance. There's so much of the hands-on. How do you do those virtual type things? We have math and science labs. How do you do all those things and do them well, and what can be done virtually and what has to be done, and how do you measure it? How do you measure that the student has competency? So measuring competency in those fields is real important, and came up and was brought. So maybe future, how do you improve the competency? How do you measure competency in some of those hands-on areas? We're more efficient. We talked about that. Less time spent, you know. Creativity, there's just so much creativity going on, which leads to best practices and so on. Gets back to what's been said. And the fact that we're still seeking success and improvement, like OPS, as Chris Shaven had said earlier. So the fact that we're still looking for lots of ways, it's only gonna get better was the big thing. And so we would ditto all the things above, I think, came out, and we would be in line with all of those issues, and I think identifying the things to going forward.
Well, I think, Mike, that's great. And that takes us right to 9:30. And I think your comment about it can only get better from here is a great way to put it, especially when we put all our minds together and all our thoughts and all our learnings from the different sectors. Julie, did you want to jump in here?
Are you wrapping things up?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So, no, I just want to say really quickly, thank you to everyone that was able to join us today. And also a special thank you to our sponsors that as a result of their sponsorship, there was no fee today. So we hope we're able to continue this kind of conversation. So our sponsors were Avenue Scholars, BVH Architect, Clarkson College, Metro Community College, the Zoo, Olson, and UNO STEM Trail Center. So thank you for your support.
Excellent. Thank you, sponsors, and thank you everyone that was able to join us this morning. We do have a survey link that was dropped in the chat, and also a survey link. The same survey will come out from Julie. So please just it's a short survey. It's not going to take you 30 minutes. It's really quick. But like we talked about, we need data, just like you guys want data, and that will only help us make the next meeting better. And we hope to see you guys again in a few months. So have a wonderful June, July, August, and we'll see you back in September. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thanks.
Alexa, do you want to stop recording?
Oh,